What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves, physically, emotionally, and spiritually?
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, you know, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, well, since 2002, that's 12 years.
What if you could time travel with them? Visit mythical places or angelic realms, other worlds, other galaxies. Help others to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT, and now you can learn her method by going directly to dolorescannon.com. And don't forget to mention the discount code MORETALKS. Hey guys, and welcome to another edition of The Kevin Moore Show, which is sponsored by my website, channeling.com. Now on today's show, I'm about to be joined by my guest, James Purpura. Now when James and his wife Steph first met, both of their lives were at rock bottom financially, emotionally, and spiritually. The story of how they dedicated themselves to transforming their inner and outer experiences of life, creating a fortune in the meantime, is an inspiring journey with practical lessons of self-transformation for anyone who has ever dreamed of becoming a better and more successful person. James, welcome to the show.
I'm so happy to be here.
No, honestly, this is going to be an interesting interview for myself, what I'm going through right now, and I know it will help so many other people as well. I'm going to get just to direct us to a few points before we start. Obviously, you've got a documentary out, Perception, Seeing is Not Believing, okay? And that's available through your website. Your website is?
Powerful-u.com. And we also have an app. Just type in Powerful U, the letter U, into any device, and you can get our app. It's called The Powerful Universe.
Wonderful. Now, has this documentary gone to some film festivals as well?
Yeah, it's won loads of awards, actually. Just won Best Picture and Best Documentary at the LA Film Festival. It won Best Documentary at the Hollywood Film Festival. It's winning awards all over the world, actually.
That's wonderful. And I mean, the great thing is at least you've been able to put it out there and not had to wait till it goes to the film festivals for people to see it. Do you know what I mean?
We stood up a platform to distribute it ourselves because I think the way that independent films are distributed is broken right now because none of the independent filmmakers get to keep their customer data.
Yes, well, and we'll get into the business side of what you're doing as well, most definitely. What would you say then is the most important message of what you're trying to do right now?
So it's two things. It's perception and emotions. I think there's a lot of debate out there. What is the creative elements of our lives? But, you know, when you break it down, everything that you are, everything that you see, everything that you experience is dictated by perception. Your emotions give your life the only meaning they have. And so when you understand those two concepts fully, then you can consciously create your life.
Emotions. I mean, how important are they? Do we a lot of us don't listen to our emotions sometimes, do we?
So I'm going to give you an example of how important emotions are. So here's the basic bottom line with emotions. Emotions weren't ever meant to tell you there was something wrong on the outside. They were meant to tell you there's something wrong on the inside. And so what emotions really do is they are our window into our subconscious mind, because basically what happens is that when you're having an emotional response, because we're not taught how to deal with emotions as a kid, we generally do two things. We repress it, we push them down, or we project it, we make it about others. And so the big problem we're having with emotions is the fact that most oftentimes it's like, oh, I blame my emotions on other people. It's like, you made me mad. Or if you're mad at me, it's like, oh, they don't like me. And so what we like to tell people is that you got to stop making your emotions about other people and stop making their emotions about you. And so emotions can tell you more than you can possibly imagine about what's going on with you in any situation. And so we have developed something called an emotional integration technique, which allows you to go in and integrate the emotions. Now, I can tell from, our interactions before the show here that you have a lot of emotions going on in you right now, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
And so what are the emotions that you're feeling?
I suppose, I don't know if I think it's probably loss and regret and uncertainty a little bit in some respects. Yeah, there's a lot of that.
Okay, so let's see if we can actually process that emotion together. So I want to do an experiment with you. You want to do an experiment?
Sure, why not? Why not? Why not?
Okay, so can you move into this feeling of loss or regret, this feeling that you're currently feeling? Can you close your eyes and move into that for a second? And allow yourself to.
I can close my eyes and move into that. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so just kind of shake your head up and down when you're there. Okay, so tell me where in your body that you feel that emotion.
I think it's more in my well, yeah, that's also it, isn't it? Where is it? Probably in my heart. Probably
Okay,
there
so
more,
now I want you to feel into the pain in your heart. Okay, this is not a thinking thing, this is a feeling thing. And I want you to, there's an early childhood memory attached to the pain in your heart, and it'll just pop into your mind. The first time in your life you remember feeling the same feeling. Let me know when you have the memory.
It's so difficult. I've repressed so much of that stuff. Do you know what I mean?
So you don't have to, so you're thinking, don't think, feel. Feel the pain in your heart associated with the upset that you're feeling now. And a memory is attached to that pain. It's the first time in your life you remember feeling that same pain. It'll just pop into your mind.
Okay.
Got it?
Okay.
Okay, so open your eyes for a second. So let me ask you a question. Is that a memory you're comfortable with sharing here with your audience?
I don't know if it's a true memory or not. Do you know what I mean? But there's a few. That being bullied at school probably was one that came up. There was another one. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, so here's what happens. So let me explain to you why that came up. And so you're dealing with some personal issues right now. You're feeling very betrayed. You're feeling hurt. You're feeling regret. And so I had to bring that issue up. And so as we felt into the pain of that issue is what we need to understand about emotions, that emotions are stored in the body, not in the mind. And so how perception and emotions work together is that essentially everything has a source in your past, because your perception does something similar to a Google search, meaning that every time you're having an experience, it goes into your past and it finds an experience that's similar to the experience you're currently having, and then it uses that experience to place meaning on the current experience. The problem is that you have no insight into how far back it's got to go or what experience it pulls, but what happens is that all experiences have emotions attached to them, so the emotion of the old experience is now inputted on the new experience. But there's something that's really interesting and happening. And now I could have said to you, bring up anything that makes you mad. It could have been somebody cut you off in traffic, your neighbor's dog pooped in your yard. It doesn't really matter. It actually always goes back to the same spot. And that's the spot you found. And it was the first time in your life that you felt a substantive rejection. So I've walked hundreds of people through this, and it doesn't matter what they're mad about. It always goes back to the first rejection. So your bullying in school makes perfect sense. And here's why it does. And here's why it's important, is because here's what you need to understand is when you go back into the history of our species, when we existed in tribes, right? We have three major fears. Our biggest fear is death, but there's three types of death that we fear. The first type of death that we fear is the fear of uncertainty, which is, potential death. We wouldn't leave this area to go into the other valley unless the fear of dying was now less real than not going, because you wouldn't risk death. And so that's the fear of uncertainty. The second form of death that we fear is the fear of instant death. And so instant death, fortunate enough for us as a species, we put labels on it. We don't do things that kill us because we know what they are now. Our ancestors weren't so lucky. Now, the third form of death that we experience is by far the scariest, and it's ugly death. And there is an evolutionary equivalent to ugly death, and that is actually being rejected. When we existed in packs, they didn't even have a word for I. There was only we, because there was no survival alone. It takes 10 guys with us to fight off a bear. There's no getting around it. So if you got rejected by the pack, what happened was that rejection literally meant you were dead and ugly dead. Now, here's where it gets really, really interesting, is that there's only one way to live at this point, and that is to either gain acceptance of the pack or gain control over the pack. And so if you look at every problem we have as a species right now, it's all based on people either trying to gain acceptance or trying to gain control. And essentially what happens is that when we're rejected when we're a little kid, what we don't realize is that when you were a child, you didn't feel separate from your parents, right? You felt like you were part of the we. And when you went to school and you got rejected, you now are an I. And whatever I is now not good enough. And so what this happens inside of you is it kicks off this primal program, and the fight for your survival has just begun. So essentially what I'm saying is that was the introduction of fear into your life right there. That's why that memory came up as it related to what you're feeling now. And because you felt that feeling in your heart, it dictates betrayal. And that's what you experienced at school. Was you're walking through a schoolyard, somebody starts picking on you, you're like, wait, I'm not good enough, right? And so that's actually when, in the spiritual traditions, that the ego takes over and says, well, I got you. If this isn't good enough, it spins up a persona and it says, well, is this good enough? And they're like, well, that's not good enough either. And so you keep spinning up personas. But here's the part that's really scary, is the fact that the only thing that you know is that the most authentic version of you is now not good enough. And so you're trying to become anything other than the most authentic version of you. And so I have this saying, and the saying is, what if you're everything that you think that you're not and nothing that you think that you are, right? And that's the most likely scenario, because you've been running away from the most authentic version of yourself from the second that you had rejection. Now, here's the lie, and this is where it gets really interesting. I could come over to your house, I could take all your stuff, right? And I could kick you outside. Are you going to survive? And so why is survival? Survival is no longer at stake. And so rejection no longer equals survival. But there is a survival mechanism running inside of all of us from the second that we're rejected, and that's the introduction of fear. So the lie that sits at the core of all of our beings is in fact fear, right? Because there's nothing you have to do in order to survive anymore. And even though that we go to the grocery store to get groceries, what we don't realize is that we're still 100% dependent on each other for survival, right? But there's nothing you have to do, so you can do anything you want. But now here's the question. So you believe, just like I believe, and everybody believes to this point, that you're fighting for your survival, right? But that's not actually true. And so the fear is, right now you're feeling betrayed. Right now you're feeling like you're not good enough. Right now you're feeling like you have a lot of regret. The question is, do those feelings serve you?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, do they serve a positive purpose in your life today?
Well, I think I would like to say no is the answer, right? But I mean, all feelings. What did someone say to me once? All feelings are there's something about feelings, about how emotions are real, but that doesn't mean they're true, in a sense.
Right. So it serves you in the sense that it tells you that there's something going on in your subconscious mind that's not congruent with who you are. And that's something that's going on right now because of your personal issues, you're feeling very insecure about who you are and your capabilities. And so you're questioning whether or not you're good enough. And does the belief that you're not good enough serve you? And that's what the emotion is pointing to. So I would say the feeling does in the sense that it's pointing to this false or limiting belief, but does that belief serve you?
Yep. I mean, what's your thoughts on past lives? You know, that I mean, I know it's a bit out of your remit and stuff, but the work that you've done. But I know you're quite open to the metaphysical stuff. I mean, what about the idea that we bring a lot of karmic stuff from our past lives, and that's affecting us, right now, and we're not owning that?
So the answer is, yeah, I believe that's true, but it doesn't matter. And here's why it doesn't matter: is because all of your emotions and all of your fears are showing up in the current moment. Doesn't matter if it's this life or 15 lives, right? They're all right here. And they can actually be dealt with right here. So the question is, does the belief that you're not good enough serve you?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. No.
Okay, so the second question is, do you want to get rid of it?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm doing. I mean, can it be instantaneous? Everything takes a bit of time to heal, doesn't it? Do you know what I mean?
Why don't you give me a minute and we'll see if we can get rid of it?
Okay, I'm up for that. Yep.
Okay, so this is the emotional integration technique. So here's what I would like you to do. Okay, now during this process, there's going to be a lot of emotion come up in your body. Your throat may close up, your heart may race. There might be a lot of things going on. And the thing that you have to remember is you need to stay in your breath, deep breaths. Okay. And so essentially what we're going to do is that an introduction to fear, there's a perception of fear, and then you have the physiology of fear. And so we actually have to separate the two. We have to separate the perception and the physiology so that the physiology is no longer causing the body reaction. So I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to go back into that schoolyard, okay? And I want you to imagine you're being bullied. And I want you to allow all of the responses that you feel in your body, all the confusion, all of the pain that you're feeling in that moment. All right, and I want you to imagine that you are alone, the younger version of you is alone, and you see yourself sitting somewhere. It could be on a bench, could be next to a tree. And I want you to go sit down next to yourself. And I want you to put your arm around yourself, and I want you to give yourself the love that you needed in that moment not to feel that way. And here's what I would like you to say to yourself. I'd like you to look at yourself and say, I want you to know that you're good enough. And I want you to know that you are amazing. And I want you to know that I have an incredible life right now because of your strength. And I want you to honor and thank yourself for that, for who they are and doing the best that you could in that situation. Okay? Now, here's the next thing I want you to do. I want you to feel the fear of that moment, all of it build up in your chest and your neck. And I want you to breathe love and gratitude into that fear. I want you to be grateful for the fear. And here's why, because when we're young, we adopt fear because we don't have the mental or physical capacity to defend ourselves. You now have that capacity, so now you can process that emotion that's stuck in the past. So bring up all of that emotion, sit in the thought of being bullied, but breathe love and gratitude into the fear that you adopted and then just say, I release you. And just sit with it until you can feel a shift inside of you. And if you're a channeler and if you can get into your inner guidance, just have them direct this process, but you have to get it out of the body.
It's funny because actually what's coming to me is actually the current situation that I've got going on in my life, which I'm not prepared to talk about right now, right? And it was not the schoolyard. That was just a smokescreen. It's actually, I was giving myself a hug just from a few months ago. Yeah.
Right. So the schoolyard is the introduction. The latest situation is the reflection. And so it doesn't matter where you deal with it. And the reason I went back to the schoolyard is because we're going to cut the legs out from underneath the table, right? And we can move into the situation that happened a couple of weeks ago, and nobody on the air's got to know what happened. And so I want you to go, and I want you to realize this one thing. You've only ever done the best that you can. and there's nothing wrong with you. And I want you to sit in this feeling of rejection, and I want you to feel that pain of rejection burn inside of you as you breathe love and gratitude into it, because it's bringing to your awareness that there's a false and limiting belief about who you are, that you're not good enough, but that's not true. And so you have to be able to breathe through until that feeling, not the thought, but the feeling just releases. Notice your breath, keep breathing. Just keep breathing. And move love and gratitude for the version of you that felt that pain. You are now strong enough to handle this emotion and process it, and say to the emotion, I release you. And if it has anything to say on the way out, like you need me or you're stupid, just say thank you. And then say, but I still release you. And you'll feel a shift inside of you. Do you feel it?
Yeah,
I can feel it.
I mean, even just putting my arms around myself and around someone else as well at the same time, like I'm in the middle of these two people, myself and the other person. Yeah.
Tell them it's okay. That everything's working out just the way it's supposed to. Okay.
Well, let me open up my eyes. You said something. Thank you for that. You said something really interesting there, right? You said there. What was your words? That there are no mistakes. Basically, you were saying we did the best we could.
So let me give you that narrative, but I want you to notice one thing before you open your eyes. Close your eyes one more time. Do you hear the white noise? Okay, so all the noise in your head comes from your body. What we did was we went into your past and we eliminated and processed emotion that was repressed in your body. So anytime you get angry or sad, you need to realize that white noise is home, right? And you need to find home every day. And so as you're moving through life and all these emotions come up, do the same thing we just did. And so I want to do one more thing really quickly because it's really important. What do you know the thing that you love in the world the most right now?
I want to say it's myself. I want to say I'm trying.
Okay, but no, don't go there. I mean, what's something you love? And you don't have to say it out loud. Just, can you bring that up? I want you to feel the thing that you love the most, and I want you to feel it in your heart. And I want you to get it to the fact where you've got so much gratitude and love moving into your heart that it feels like a fire. Now I want you to go find that younger version of you in the schoolyard. And I want you to put your arm around him. And I want you to tell him that life has been no fun without him. And that you want him to come home. And now that you can protect him. And I want you to move him into your heart, right next to that thing you love the most right now. Because that is the love that you have for yourself. Because you have to be able to embrace every version of you. And that's when we'll move into the narrative that you've never made a mistake and that you're only ever doing the best you can. And that's what you have to recognize, is that there's no reason to beat yourself up, because to this point in your life, you've only ever done the best that you can. So breathe into that. Realize that you are magnificent, that you are amazing, right? And the rejection, you know, what other people got going on has nothing to do with you. It has to do with them. Your emotions have to do with you. And at some point, you chose to believe things about yourself that weren't true. But it's time to release those. You can open your eyes.
Okay. Now thank you so much, because I know this will help many people when they watch this back as well, and in the future.
So let's talk about that narrative.
Yeah. I was going to say, okay. So I'm currently editing a murder docuseries, right? And you know, obviously been interviewing the guy that's been in prison for 37 years for that murder, and he would find it impossible to say to himself he did the best he could at that moment when he was putting that screwdriver into that man's heart and the baseball bat around his head, you know, to kill him.
So here's the narrative, okay? Is that you've never made a bad decision. Not only have you never made a bad decision, you're not even capable of it unless you're mentally ill. And so if that gentleman, you know, which we could at that moment, was not in his right mind, then that kind of moves around that scenario. But here's what I would tell you is that not only have you never made a bad decision, you're not even capable of making a bad decision. Because here's what a bad decision would be. Making a decision at the time that you're making it that you know is against your best interest. And so we don't make decisions that way. We only ever do the best we can with the information we have available to us. So you've never made a bad decision. You've only ever made decisions with bad information. Okay. And the reason, you can say that's phonetics, but it's not, because the reason that's important is because once you start to understand that, what you understand is the problem is not you. The problem is the information, right? And so it's like, where do we get our information? Perception and emotions. And that's why they are the creative elements of our lives. And so you can stop beating yourself up because you were never the problem. Life is pretty simple. Good information leads to good decisions, leads to good outcome, right? Faulty information leads to faulty decisions, which leads to faulty outcome. If my life is something that yours isn't, it's not because I'm smarter than you or better than you or, whatever it is because I have a better access to better information. And so that's where perception comes into the equation. And so you can stop beating yourself up. Everybody on the radio or podcast or YouTube, stop beating yourself up. You're not the problem. It's an information problem. And so how do we upgrade the information? We learn about perception and emotions.
Right. Now, obviously, we've not mentioned your wife much, Steph, but she's 50% of this, of because it's both your success that's brought you to the point of the work that you're doing now. I understand she's not very well right now, so I hope she gets better soon. But she went through abuse as a child, and whether it's emotional or sexual in her case, I believe. How has she come to terms with that sexual abuse at that time, being that young child? When most people will say, well, she didn't have that ability to make this kind of that kind of judgment. Her brain wasn't even mature enough to go there.
So that's a great point. So let me give you, first of all, Steph went through some sexual abuse. She got abandoned by her father. She ended up on the floor of a hotel room after a brutal suicide attempt. We met, and together we started learning the processes that we're going to outline. But, I was sitting in solitary confinement about 17 years ago. Okay. All right. So when I was sitting there, I had an epiphany, right? I used to write these long lists of people who had harmed me. And one day I was looking down at the list, and here's the thought that I had. The only common denominator between all these situations is me. What if I am somehow the cause of all of these experiences? And then I started thinking, because I'd never really considered whether or not I was the creator of my experiences to that point, right? And so I thought, well, I couldn't have created some of my experiences and not all of them. So I'm either the creator or I'm not the creator. And so I spent a little time thinking about that question and what that meant. And if I was, in fact, the creator of my experiences, it meant I had to take responsibility for everything that ever happened to me. And if I wasn't, because bad things do happen to good people, right? It meant the world really was a terrible place, and I probably don't want to live anymore. And so I decided on that day that I was going to take responsibility for everything that ever happened to me. And so I had to, and so I took my power back. And so let me tell you where I got to with that. So I had to decide, does my abuse define me, right? And so in the case of my wife, does our abuse define us? And so when I was in kindergarten, my teacher called me stupid every day. I had the class call me stupid. And so when I take responsibility, when I say I'm taking responsibility for everything that happened for me, is I never take responsibility for somebody else's actions. That's on them, right? I only take responsibility for my part. And so in this kindergarten situation, was it the abuse that defined me? And if the answer is yes, then I'm stuck forever because I can't go back and change the abuse. So I had to ask myself this question, which was, well, has everybody who ever been abused allowed it to destroy them? And if the answer to that question is no, which it is, then it's not the abuse. Well, then what was it? And this is where Steph and I got to. It's the things that we chose to believe about ourselves through living through that abuse. And so, my teacher called me stupid. The other students called me stupid. And through living through that, I chose to believe that I was stupid, that I was not good enough, that I was not smart enough, right? And so just what you said, right? People say all the time, wait, no, you were only 5. How were you supposed to know the difference? And I always say when they say that, like, stop taking my power away, right? Because you're right. I did the best I could with the information I had available to me, but it was still my choice, right? It was still my choice. And in that choice, I can go back and change that choice. I can't go back and change the abuse. So it's the choices, the things, how we respond is what creates our life, not the situations that happen to us. And so when you're talking about responsibility, or if you're talking about, everything's my fault, never take responsibility for the other person's part in it. You're only taking responsibility for the things that you chose to believe about yourself, having lived through that. And those beliefs create your perception and your emotions, which create your life.
Interesting. Very, very interesting way of looking at it. Yeah, I've not quite looked at that from that perspective before. So thank you for that. Well, we could. I mean, that's a whole show on itself, isn't it? In some respects, and there's so much to get through here as well. Okay. Well, just going back to the documentary, obviously, it's you've called it perception, seeing is not believing. So what is the science of perception then? Would you say?
So it's exactly what the title says. Seeing is not believing. I think we've heard our whole lives. I'll believe it when I see it. You hear people say that, but the truth is that's not the way your mind works. Here's the bottom line understanding of perception. You do not see reality, right? And I say that to people like, yeah, I went to school, I know. Or what do you mean I don't see reality? And you don't have access to reality at all. And so, people are like, even if they agree with it, they don't actually believe it because it feels real, right? It's like, what are you talking about? I'm interacting with my world. Of course I see reality. And what I would say to you is that, what is it that you do see? And this is the part that, really people don't understand is you see an assumption of what you think reality is based on what it was in the past, right? So your past is always getting input into your future. So every time you're having an experience, your mind does something similar to a Google search. It goes back into the past, finds a similar experience, and applies the same meaning it did last time. And so that's how your perception works. But the problem is that, just like Google, your mind is full of contradictions. And so it's constantly delivering interpretations that aren't consistent with reality. So if you don't see reality, what do you see? You actually can only see what you believe to be possible. And people don't really get that. It's like seeing is believing. No, believing is actually seeing. And I'll give you a really simple story to illustrate this point. So can you have the thing you want most in the world sitting right in front of your face and just not see it? Okay. And a lot of people answer no to that. But I'm going to give you a simple story. I want you to imagine a man. This man wants more than anything to be loved. He wants to be in a relationship. Unfortunately, he has really low self-esteem, really poor image of himself, right? One day, this man walks into a store. He walks up the counter. The lady behind the counter starts flirting with him. Does he recognize the girl who's flirting with him?
Right. Absolutely not. Yeah.
Yeah. So everybody always says probably not or absolutely not. And so you already... That's a fundamental understanding of how perception works, is that the reason he doesn't see it is because he doesn't believe it's possible because of his low self-esteem, right? And so now people think this is a cute story and they laugh at it and they go, oh, well, maybe that happens sometimes. No, that literally happens all the time because your perception can only see what you believe to be possible. So the question everybody should be asking themselves is, what if the things that I want most in the world are right in front of my face and I can't see them? And the answer is the opportunity to get those things absolutely is, because we live in a universe of infinite possibilities. And so there's a lot of talk out there about like the law of attraction. And here's where they got it wrong. The law of attraction was never about, you sit and you look at this vision board and you meditate for these things and these things draw into your awareness. That's not what the law of attraction does. When you look at a vision board, you're fostering beliefs not to drag new opportunities in, but to see the opportunities that are already there being presented to you. Period. They're already there. Everybody is the guy in the store. And it's like, well, like people are always like, I don't know. And we've all had that experience. It's like, and not only have we had that experience, but I want you to imagine we're back in the store, the guy's at the counter, and you're his friend, and you're standing off to the side, and you're watching this interaction, right? He turns around, and he comes walking towards you. What do you say to him? You'd be like, dude, that girl was flirting with you. Yeah, but what happens in that situation, because we've all been there, right? We've either been the guy or the friend, and instantly he knows it's true, right? He's like, oh my God, like, you're totally right. She was flirting with me. What was I thinking, right? So that's life, is that you can only see what you believe to be possible, right? The less you believe it, the less likely you are to see it. The more you believe it, the more likely you are to see it. And the question is why? And here's why. It's actually really simple math. Your brain processes millions of bits of information a second. And so your subconscious mind takes all that information, crunches it down to the most interesting bits, delivers it to your conscious mind, right? And it's simply that your subconscious mind isn't on the lookout for things that you don't believe are possible. Would you go to the end of a rainbow and look for a pot of gold? No. Why? Because you don't believe it's there. Your subconscious mind isn't looking out for things that you aren't believe it's possible. That's just a waste of time and energy. And so that's why you don't see it, is because you don't believe it. And so the first step to creating anything you want in life is fostering belief around not only is it possible, but it's possible for you and you deserve it. That's why belief is such a big part of this scenario.
Well, you did mention, but yeah, you when we were doing that exercise with me, you were talking about self-love, and I think that's something that you practice quite a bit, to tell yourself that you loved yourself, again and again and again and again. I think from some bits that I've read, and but I mean, how long was that process to really fall in love with yourself? To honor yourself.
Years. But I mean, just to be clear.
Yeah.
So when Steph and I started on our journey, so from the time I got out of jail to my first $1 million was 9 years, right? And that seems like, oh, that was really fast, but it was the longest 9 years of my life, right? Because we would work on issues every day. And so what we didn't go into this with a fundamental understanding of perception. And so the reason it's important for people to read the book or watch the movie is because we're going to save you 9 years, right? But because what we didn't realize is the other underlying thing around perception is what you believe on the inside is what reflects on the outside. So the only thing you're ever interacting with is your beliefs. So if there's any gamers listening, it's like you're playing a video game and on the screen of the world it's being projected your beliefs. So you're only ever interacting with your beliefs. And so often at times as people, what we do is we go to the outside and we try to fix things, but it's only a reflection of what's going on inside of you. And so the key is that the inside, you have to work from the inside out. As you work from the inside out and you start to change your beliefs about yourself and the world around you, then the things outside of you change. I think it was Wayne Dyer said, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Yeah, it was.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's very real, is because it's an inside out scenario. And so the way we came to those conclusions after years and years and years of trying to work from the outside in, trying to constantly tell ourselves we loved ourselves. And so, but when we did start shifting our perception, when these things started, see, we believed it was more like we're going to put as much positive next to the negative in our subconscious and the unconscious mind. And at some point, the positive started outweighing the negative, and the positive started showing up in our life instead of the negative. Well, that didn't mean that negative was gone. We kind of a teeter-totter type thing, right? But what we found through the integration technique was after we made our first $1 million, we were like, are we happy? And we both said no. And then we went back to figure out what fosters happiness. And here's the other challenge that we have as a species. We've been made to choose. You just did a whole documentary on channeling. I guarantee you the vast majority of the people that you interviewed are probably broke, right? And it's because the spiritual path, what we have in our society is we have a bunch of rich people that are miserable. We have a bunch of spiritual people who are happy but broke. And true mastery is being able to master both things. And it both comes down to perception. Creating in the outside world is about shifting your perception of the outside circumstances. Creating on the inside world is about shifting your perception of your inside world. You can have both, and it's actually the most efficient way to do it.
And that self-love is such a big part of that. It really is. You know,
it's everything.
It's everything. It's everything.
It's everything.
And also, you know, when you talk about making your first million, people pretty well understand that just, you know, how much work and how much you both had to give up to get to this point.
Oh, yeah. I mean, people think like I'd go to work and people would be like, oh, I was up playing video games last night. I'm like, who has time to play video games? I got kids. We sit on the bed, talk about issues. We talk about perceptions. We're meditating. We're praying. We're doing all these things. We're doing all the things because we didn't know what was going to work. And that's what the book is about. And this is the part that people need to understand, right? Is that you can create anything you want. You can be anything you want. You can be happy. You can be fulfilled. You can create in the outside world. You can have well-being on the inside world. And, I mean, there's people listening to the sound of our voice right now, and they're considering taking their own life, right? And what I want to tell those people is there is hope, right? You are not alone. There is, fear was introduced into your life. And from that point forward, you've been dancing to the tune of the wrong drummer. And so you can create both. You can have happiness. You can have wealth. You can have all of the things your heart desires when you understand the mechanism by which you create those things, which are your perception and your emotions. And so here's the two principles. Question everything. That's perception. Question everything. It's like I tell people, well, you're wrong. And they're like, well, what am I wrong about? I'm like, turns out just about everything. And why is that important to know? Because if you have all the answers, your life is the best it's ever going to get right now, right? And if you're wrong, you're standing in the questions. And then you can question your life. You can question your interpretations. The other side of it is stop making your emotions about other people. Your emotions are about you, and they point to, they're your window of what's going on in your subconscious mind.
Yeah, it's always about what someone else has done to us, isn't it? Even in a separation, it's you're the problem, and change is hard as well, isn't it? When change happens to us, we don't want to go through that change. Sometimes most people don't do. We want to stay where we are.
Right, because it engage. You have to engage with uncertainty, and so here's I got to kind of wrap up here, but here's where it all comes down to: is that fear has two components. It has the perceptual component and as the physiological component. And so the key and what we did in that integration technique is that you have to separate the perception of fear from the physiology of fear. So how you do that is you bring the fear up into your conscious awareness, and as the physiological response comes in, you start breathing into that, and you actually remove the physiology of fear while holding the fear in your mind, and then you're changing or detaching the negative emotional response. And then that fear no longer has power over you. And that's how you shift your inside world.
Absolutely. And I know we've got to, you've got to get going soon. And I just want to say this as well. Obviously, you make yourself very accessible to people. I mean, I know that, would you say you've sort of moved into the sort of self-help genre right now? Is that where you would be comfortable?
What Powerful You is we're trying to recreate the help space to make all the information, the best information, accessible to everybody. And so the movie's out there, the book's out there. We have a perception sketch, which will tell you exactly where you're stuck. Take the sketch, watch the movie. We actually have a content platform called The Powerful Universe, where we film amazing content for $12 a month. You can see all of this self-help content you want. And so we're trying to transform the industry because we believe it's catered to rich people and the content's not that good.
Well, it is.
We're trying to create that.
It is. And there's many paths to the same destination, isn't there? So people will watch this and they maybe then go and watch an interview with someone else, right? But why your path?
My path is this. When we sold our worldwide technology company, we had to ask ourselves this question, which was, is this the world we want our kids or grandkids to grow up in? And the answer was no. And so I believe if you have the means, you have the responsibility. And so this is our attempt to make the world, into the place we want our kids and grandkids to grow up in.
Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, well, look, James.
And it's our way to give back, too.
Yeah, well, absolutely, yeah, that's for sure. Well, look, James, just thank you so much for coming on. Just before we go, your website again is?
Powerful-the-letter-u.com. The movie's actually streaming for free right now. It's winning awards all over the world. Please go check it out. I mean, we're just trying to present you with opportunities.
James, it's been an honor, my friend. Thank you for trying to help me out there. You did help me out there. Just even doing this interview has helped me out and so many other people as well, and it will continue to. So just thank you so much for what you do as well.
Thank you, and take a couple deep breaths and just know that you're okay and that you're good enough and that everything's going to work out. All right, brother. Thank you.